The screaming started at exactly 1400 hours, Galactic Standard Time. In the crimson-lit slave markets of Vorthok Prime, human girls stood chained on the auction block. Their names were Sarah Chen and Maria Santos, though their captors called them only by numbers, Lot 17 and Lot 18. Sarah was 19, former engineering student whose hands still bore the calluses from working on spacecraft engines. Her dark eyes burned with defiance despite the neural collar wrapped around her neck, its blue lights pulsing with each attempt to break her spirit. Maria, barely 17, clutched a small metal cross hidden in her palm. The daughter of a colonial farmer, she had never seen worlds beyond Earth's outer settlements until the hegemony raiders came. Now she stood beside Sarah, their chains linked together in a cruel display of human merchandise. The auctioneer, a towering Vorthok with skin like molten copper and four arms that gestured dramatically, raised his voice over the crowd of alien buyers. Behold, citizens of the hegemony. Fresh stock from the Terra system. Young, strong, fertile. Observe their unusual neural patterns. Humans show remarkable creativity under pressure, perfect for mining operations or entertainment. The crowd of assembled aliens chittered and hissed their approval. Reptilian saurians rubbed their scaled hands together. Insectoid klaxons clicked their mandibles hungrily. Even other mammals, the wolf-like Fenrix, howled their interest. Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. She had studied these species in xenobiology class, never imagining she would one day be evaluated by them like livestock. The bidding begins at 500 credits each, the auctioneer announced. A saurian in the front row immediately raised a clawed hand. 1,000 for the dark-haired one? 1,500 for both, called out a klaxon merchant, its voice like grinding metal. Sarah turned to Maria, whose face had gone pale. The younger girl's lips moved in silent prayer. Whatever happens, Sarah whispered, remember who you are. Remember Earth. The neural collar sent a sharp shock through her system for speaking without permission. Sarah gritted her teeth and remained standing, high above the market. None of the aliens noticed the tiny probe drifting past the station's outer hull. No larger than a grain of sand, it transmitted a simple message across the void of space. The message reached Earth in 47 minutes. The response would come much sooner than anyone expected. #. Chapter 2. The Awakening Admiral, Catherine Iron Kate. Thorne was reviewing casualty reports when the priority alert flashed across her command. Screen. The soft chime of the emergency beacon cut through the quiet hum of the Earth Defense Force headquarters, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps. She had been expecting this day for 23 years. Admiral, her aide, Lieutenant Commander. James Park burst through the office doors without knocking. His usually composed face was flushed with urgency. We have confirmation. The hegemony has taken humans. It's girls from the outer colonies. Thorne's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. She set it down with deliberate precision, her weathered hands steady despite the storm building behind her steel-gray eyes. Show me. The holographic display materialized above her desk, showing real-time footage from the probe. Sarah and Maria stood on the auction block, their humanity on display for creatures that saw them as nothing more than commodity. Thorne had been a young captain. During humanity's first contact with the galactic hegemony 15 years ago, she remembered the condescending speeches about Earth being a protected protectorate. The trade agreements that heavily favored alien worlds, the constant reminders that humanity was too young, too primitive, too dangerous to be trusted with. Real power in galactic affairs. She also remembered the classified reports, the ones about human colonies that went dark, the ones about pirates who always seemed to target human settlements, the ones that her superiors told her to file away and forget about. Catherine Thorne had never been good at forgetting. Patch me through to President Martinez, she commanded, and get me Admiral Chen, Admiral Okafor, and General Harrison on secure channels. Authorization Omega 77. Lieutenant Commander Park's eyes widened. Omega 77 was the highest classification in the Earth Defense Force. There were fewer than a dozen people on Earth who even knew it existed. Ma'am, are you certain? 23 years, James? Thorne's voice was ice over steel. 23 years we've been playing their game, following their rules, pretending to be the grateful junior partners. Whoa, 23 years of watching. Our people disappear in filing diplomatic protests that get buried in bureaucratic committees. She stood, her uniform crisp, despite the late hour. At 62, Catherine Thorne still moved like the fighter pilot she had once been. Not anymore. Within an hour, the most secure conference room on Earth was filled with the leadership of humanity's military forces. President Elena Martinez appeared via encrypted hologram from the White House Situation Room, her face grave. Confirmed intelligence. Indicates to human females ages 17 and 19. Are being sold at a slave auction on Vorthok Prime, Admiral Chen reported. His daughter Sarah had been among the colonists taken. His voice remained steady, but his knuckles were white, where he gripped the table edge. The Hegemony Council will claim it was unauthorized pirates, General Harrison added. Same story they always tell. And we'll file another protest, President Martinez said bitterly. And they'll form another committee to investigate. And in 6 months, they'll conclude that, regrettably, the perpetrators escaped justice. Thorne leaned forward. Madam President, I'm requesting authorization to implement Project Prometheus. The room fell silent. Even through the holographic connection, you could see President Martinez go pale. Project Prometheus was the most classified military operation in human history. For 2 decades, while Earth publicly maintained peaceful relations with the hegemony. A shadow fleet had been prepared in secret. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt. Weapon systems reverse-engineered from captured alien technology. Training facilities that didn't officially exist. All of it justified by a simple premise. Eventually, humanity would need to fight for its survival. The question was not if, but when. Kate, the president said quietly, if we do this, there's no going back. The hegemony has 1,000 member species. Their fleets outnumber ours 1,000,000 to 1. Yes, ma'am. But they've never fought humans before. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. They think they understand us from our cultural exports and diplomatic meetings. They think we're soft, emotional, divided. They're about to learn why Earth has never had a single global government, Thorne added. It's not because we can't cooperate. It's because we're too dangerous when we do. President Martinez closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, her voice carried the weight of history. Authorization granted. God help us all. High above Earth, hidden among the orbital debris and decommissioned satellites, ancient systems began to awaken. Weapon platforms that had masqueraded as space junk for decades powered up their fusion cores. Stealth ships shed their camouflage and began moving toward jump points in the asteroid belt. Massive doors opened on facilities that didn't appear on any official charts. Ships that had never been publicly acknowledged prepared for their first and possibly missions. Humanity's secret was about to be revealed. Chapter 3. Fire in the Void. The first sign that something was wrong came when the stars began to move on Vorthok Prime. The slave auction continued with typical hegemony efficiency. Sarah and Maria had been sold to a Saurian mining consortium for 8,000 credits, a bargain. According to the auctioneer's enthusiastic commentary, Sarah watched the credits transfer on the display screen, calculating rapidly in her head. 8,000 credits was roughly equivalent to the cost of a small atmospheric shuttle. Her entire life reduced to the price of a used vehicle. The Saurian buyer, a reptile named Seth, who spoke in sibilant hisses, examined his new property with cold yellow eyes. These will do nicely for the deep menace, he told his associate. Humans breed fast, can triple our investment in 5 years. Maria whimpered softly. And Sarah squeezed her hand despite the neural collar's warning shock. That's when the lights went out. Emergency. Illumination bathed the auction house in red light as warning sirens began to wail. The various alien species began chattering in confusion as their translators struggled to interpret the automated announcements. This is the Vorthok Defense Authority, a mechanical voice announced. All civilians report to designated shelters immediately. Unknown vessels detected at the edge of the system. Through the transparent aluminum windows of the auction house, stars that should have been fixed points of light were moving, shifting, multiplying. Seth cursed in his native tongue as his personal communicator activated the reptilian script. That appeared on his screen made his eyes widen in shock. "It's impossible," he hissed. "The Terrans don't have FTL capability." High above the planet, Admiral Thorne stood on the bridge of the EDS Prometheus, humanity's first dreadnought-class warship. The vessel had been built in secret over 15 years. Incorporating every scrap of alien technology Earth's intelligence services had managed to acquire. "Ma'am, we have weapons lock on the primary slave market," reported Commander Lisa Jong, the ship's tactical officer. "All civilian vessels have been tagged and will be avoided." Thorne nodded. Through the bridge's main view screen, she could see Vorthok Prime, a world built on the suffering of conquered species. Its massive cities sprawled across continents, connected by transport networks that moved goods and slaves with equal efficiency. Today, that would end. "Admiral," came a voice from the communications station. "We're receiving multiple hails from hegemony vessels. We're demanding we identify ourselves and state our intentions. Open a channel, all frequencies." The view screen flickered, showing dozens of alien faces, the commanders of hegemony defense vessels who had scrambled to intercept the unknown fleet. Thorne looked directly into the camera, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's collective rage. "This is Admiral Catherine Thorne of the Earth Defense Force. 23 years ago, your hegemony council told us that humans were too primitive, too emotional, too dangerous to be trusted with advanced weapons. Today, you get to find out if you were right." She gestured to Commander Jong, who nodded grimly. "All ships, this is Prometheus Actual. Light them up." The first human fleet engagement in galactic history lasted exactly 17 minutes. The hegemony defenders had superior numbers, 43 vessels against Earth's fleet of 12. They had energy shields, particle beam weapons, and centuries of combat experience against space pirates and rebellious colonies. What they didn't have was any understanding of human warfare. Earth's ships didn't fight like any species the hegemony had encountered. Instead of the formal line of battle tactics used by civilized races, the human vessels moved like predators. They used the planet's gravity well to slingshot into unexpected attack angles. They coordinated their attacks with a precision that seemed telepathic. Most importantly, they fought like they had nothing to lose. The EDS Retribution rammed a hegemony cruiser at 3/4 light speed, its captain shouting, "Remember the colonies." As her ship's fusion core overloaded, the EDS Defiance used a damaged enemy vessel as a shield while it targeted the hegemony flagship's reactor. Within minutes, burning wreckage filled Vorthek's orbital space. On the planet's surface, every alien in the auction house stared at their screens in horrified fascination. The impossible was happening. A primitive species was defeating a hegemony battle fleet. Sarah felt a savage smile cross her face as she watched Seath's yellow eyes fill with fear. "Scared?" she asked sweetly. The neural collar shocked her, but she barely felt it. "You should be. That's my species up there." The last hegemony vessel attempted to flee toward the system's jump point. It made it nearly 12 million kilometers before the ED's vengeance caught up with it. Admiral Thorne opened communications again, this time addressing the planet directly. "Citizens of Vorthok Prime, this is Admiral Thorne. We have come for our people. You have exactly 1 standard hour to release all human slaves in your system and transfer them to the surface spaceport. Any attempt to harm them will result in the immediate bombardment of your planet." She paused, letting that sink in. "I want to be very clear about what you're dealing with. Earth has been preparing for this day for 23 years. Every human world that disappeared, every colony that went silent, every diplomatic insult we remembered, we planned. We built weapons you can't imagine and trained soldiers you can't stop." The transmission cut to external cameras showing the human fleet. 12 ships that looked like nothing the galaxy had seen before, aggressive, bristling with weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. "Your hegemony council likes to remind us that there are 1,000 species in your alliance," Thorne continued. "What they forgot is that we only need to defeat one at a time." Chapter 4. The price of freedom, the rescue, was almost anticlimactic. Within 37 minutes of Admiral Thorne's ultimatum, transport ships began arriving at Vorthok Prime's main spaceport. Confused and terrified slavers herded their human captives onto the landing platforms, some still in chains, others clutching. The few possessions they had been allowed to keep, Sarah and Maria were among the first group to be released. As they walked up the ramp of the Earth's transport ship, Sarah turned back to look at Seth one final time. The Saurian stood with the other alien merchants, his yellow eyes reflecting the fires burning in the orbital debris field above. His profitable business model had just been demolished by creatures he had considered livestock. "Remember this day?" Sarah called out to him. "Remember that humans don't forgive. We never forget." The transport ship's medical bay was chaos as Earth doctors and psychologists worked to process nearly 800 rescued humans. Some had been slaves for years, others for decades. Children who had never seen Earth, adults who had given up hope of ever seeing home again. Maria sat on a medical bed, finally free of the neural collar, clutching her small metal cross. "I prayed," she whispered to Sarah. "I prayed that Earth would come for us." "Earth always comes for its own," Sarah replied, though she was still trying to process what she had witnessed. The precision of the rescue, the devastating effectiveness of the human fleet. This hadn't been a desperate rescue mission. This had been a military operation years in the planning. Dr. Emily Rodriguez, the ship's chief medical officer, approached them with a gentle smile. "How are you both holding up?" "Better now," Sarah said. "But I have questions. That fleet, those ships, how long has Earth been preparing for something like this?" Dr. Rodriguez's smile faded slightly. "Longer than most people know. And this is just the beginning." On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Thorne was receiving updates from across human space. The rescue at Vorthok Prime had been just the first operation. Simultaneously, other Earth fleets had struck targets throughout hegemony, space-freeing human slaves, destroying slaving operations and sending a very clear message. Admiral Commander Zhang reported, "We're receiving communications from the Hegemony Council. They're requesting immediate diplomatic talks." "I'm sure they are," Thorne replied dryly. "What's our casualty report?" "Retribution was lost with all hands. Defiance took heavy damage but is operational. Total personnel losses, 437. Thorne closed her eyes briefly. 437 humans had died to free 800 others. In the cold mathematics of war, it was a victory. In human terms, it was a tragedy that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Ma'am," the communications officer called out, "President Martinez is requesting a secure channel." The president's hologram appeared on the bridge, her face showing the strain of the past few hours. "Kate, the Hegemony Council is threatening full-scale war if we don't withdraw immediately and submit to arbitration. And the Chinese premier just called to congratulate us on a job well done. The Russian president is asking if we need additional ships. The African Union wants to know if they can help with refugee processing." Thorne smiled grimly. "Humanity's greatest weakness, according to the hegemony. We can't get along with each other. Turns out, we cooperate just fine when someone threatens our children," Martinez replied. "What's your recommendation, Admiral?" Thorne looked out at the stars, where the debris of the hegemony fleet still glowed against the darkness. Hegemony has been running a protection racket disguised as a galactic government for centuries. They allow member species just enough freedom to feel grateful while keeping them dependent and controlled. Any species that shows real independence gets the pirate treatment. Their colonies disappear. Their people vanish into slave markets. She turned back to the president's image. "They picked the wrong species to try that on, ma'am. I recommend we make that very clear." "What are you proposing? We give them a choice?" "They can recognize human sovereignty and equality, establish fair trade agreements, and prosecute the slavers who have been operating with their tacit approval." Thorne's voice hardened. "Or they can try to fight a species that spent 20 years planning for this exact scenario." President Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "Kate, are we ready for that kind of war?" "Madam President, we've been ready for 23 years. The question is whether they are." High above Earth, hidden weapon platforms continued their silent vigil. In the asteroid belt, massive shipyards worked around the clock, building vessels that would never appear on public registries. On a dozen worlds throughout human space, soldiers trained for battles they hoped would never come. But if those battles did come, humanity would be ready. The age of human compliance was over. Epilogue. New Horizons. 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the orbital station above New Geneva, watching the construction of humanity's newest starship. The vessel was massive, larger than anything Earth had ever built, and it bore the name Redemption across its hull in letters that gleamed like starfire. She wore the uniform of a lieutenant in the Earth's Defense Force. Her engineering background, having proven invaluable in reverse engineering, captured hegemony technology. The neural collar scars on her neck had faded, but the memories remained sharp. Impressive, isn't it? Sarah turned to see Admiral Thorne approaching, the older woman's expression thoughtful as she watched the construction crews work. Yes, ma'am. Hard to believe it's been only 6 months. Galaxy is a different place now, Thorne replied. 17 species have withdrawn from the hegemony and requested independent trade agreements with Earth. The slave markets have been shut down on 43 worlds, and the Hegemony Council is actually prosecuting the pirates who have been raiding human colonies. Sarah nodded. The changes had been remarkable, but she knew the cost. What's the current casualty count from the liberation operations? Thorne's expression darkened slightly. 2,412 dead, nearly 6,000 wounded. But we've freed over 40,000 humans from slavery and prevented countless others from suffering the same fate. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the workers move across the Redemption's hull like industrious ants. Lieutenant Thorne said finally, "I have an offer for you. The Redemption's mission will be to establish humanity's first permanent embassy in hegemony space. We need engineers who understand both human and alien technology. More importantly, we need people who understand what we're fighting for." Sarah touched her neck unconsciously, feeling the phantom weight of the neural collar. "I accept, Admiral, but I have one condition, which is, I want Maria Santos assigned as the embassy's cultural liaison. She has a gift for languages, and she understands the human cost of hegemony policies better than anyone." Thorne smiled. "Already approved. She's been studying hegemony diplomatic protocols for 3 months." As if summoned by their conversation, Maria appeared on the observation deck, her arms full of data tablets and her expression focused with the intensity that had replaced her earlier fragility. "Sarah, Admiral," she greeted them. "I have the preliminary reports from the Centauri investigation team." She handed over one of the tablets, her fingers steady despite the gravity of the information it contained. "What did they find?" Thorne asked. "Confirmation of what we suspected. The hegemony's pirate problem was never random. It was a systematic program to keep emerging species dependent and controllable. They would allow just enough raids to justify increased hegemony protection, while ensuring that no species could develop the military capability to challenge their authority." Sarah felt anger flare in her chest. How many civilizations did they destroy this way? According to the records we recovered, at least 47 over the past 2 centuries. Entire species reduced to client states, their best and brightest sold into slavery or eliminated as threats. Admiral Thorne studied the data with the expression of someone adding new entries to a very long list. "The Hegemony Council claims they're reforming their policies," she said. "Installing new oversight committees, increasing transparency, the usual bureaucratic promises. Do you believe them?" Sarah asked. Thorne looked out at the stars, where humanity's newest ships moved among. The construction yards like predators claiming new hunting grounds. "I believe they're scared. For the first time in centuries, they've encountered a species they can't control, can't manipulate, and can't destroy. That's a good start." She turned back to the 2 young women, her expression serious but hopeful. "Lasting change requires more than fear. It requires a new model species working together as equals, not subjects serving an imperial hierarchy. That's what the Redemption will be carrying when it launches." "A new model," Maria mused. "Built on what humans do best, which is..." Thorne asked. Sarah and Maria exchanged a look, And Sarah smiled for the first time in months. We survive. We adapt. And when someone tries to chain us up and sell us like livestock, she gestured toward the construction yards where dozens of human warships moved in perfect formation. We respond with fire. The three women stood together on the observation deck, watching humanity's future take shape among the stars. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, blue and green and beautiful in the void. Ahead of them lay a galaxy that would never again mistake human compassion for weakness, or human cooperation for vulnerability. The age of human subjugation was over. The age of human exploration had just begun.